So for today's review, we're going to be covering a film by a writer-director whose name is fairly infamous with the B-movie so bad it's good subgenre. Someone whose work I would consider to be as notable in the world of bad film and B-movie filmmaking as the likes of Ed Wood or Coleman Francis. Because today, we're going to be taking a look at 1986's The Visitants, the second film by the infamous Rick Sloane. Now, most people will probably be familiar with Rick's work via one or two of his movies. Either 1988's Hobgoblins, a film so infamously awful that it wound up as a latter season run episode of Mystery Science Theatre 3000, though personally, I didn't think it was that bad. In fact, I think it's rather good fun, but hey, that's just me. Or failing that, he's probably best known as the writer and director for the Vice Academy series of films. A series I'm distinctly less fond of, as it's effectively just a much less funny, much less manic, much more sexy version of Police Academy, that halves in quality with every sequel. And there are at least 6 of them. Ugh. But today, we're going to be covering one of his lesser known features. Now, it's not the most obscure film in his filmography, but 1986's The Visitants is arguably up there as definitely being one of the lesser known features that Sloane has produced. And honestly, I'm kind of surprised by that. To me, I think this is probably one of his more entertaining works. So, we're introduced into this film's world via the main antagonists of the feature, a pair of aliens called Lubbock and Exeter. These are 2 visitants, a species of alien who travel the length and breadth of the universe, scoping out habitable planets. They shapeshift into something more closely resembling the species, blend into society, and document the species' behaviour before feeding the information back to an invasion fleet who land, destroy the natives, and make the place habitable for visitants, who then head out to colonise more planets. And this time around, Lubbock and Exeter have their eyes set on Earth. They've been sent by the invasion's fleet commander to gather information on Earth over a 30-year mission, as they believe that humanity could pose a serious threat to them if they catch on that there's an imminent destruction due. So the pair land in a quiet suburb in 1956, take the form of 2 slightly off humans, and murder a local household's entire inhabitants so that they can use their home as a base of operation. We then flash forward 30 years and meet Eric. Just your average, slightly lazy, slightly cranky teen trying to make his way through the pitfalls of high school life. He has a girlfriend, Ellen, and a best friend who's, well, let's say he's a bit irritating and leave it at that, shall we? His name is Sherwin. And, well, they're all living your average all-American life. When we join Eric, it's the big day of the science fair, and a lot of Eric's final grade counts on delivering something good. But Eric's feeling despondent, largely because he's struggling to sleep at night. You see, the next door neighbours have this satellite dish that just keeps bleeping and blooping all night long, and it's keeping Eric awake, with serious impacts to his studies. As a result, he's just about managed to half-arse together a model of a molecule. Worse still, on the day of the big fair itself, Eric, while already running late, accidentally backs his car into the neighbour's satellite dish, taking it out in the process. Eric decides he'll deal with that later and races off to get to school on time. And while the rest of the class are able to wow the science teacher with talks on meteorites and more, Eric doesn't really have anything prepared, and the teacher has to bail him out so as not to embarrass him in front of the other students. Feeling even worse about his situation, Eric heads home, but later that night the neighbours sneak out and fix their satellite dish, and it turns out that they're none other than Lubbock and Exeter. They repair the dish, but Eric catches them using a funny-looking ray gun as part of the repair process, and the next morning when he wakes up, he finds that his alarm clock has been cut clean in half. Eric takes the clock to his science teacher, who at first gives him a pep talk about his classwork and becomes fascinated by Eric's broken alarm clock. Apparently the cuts are too clean, too precise, and if he could see whatever had cut the clock up, it could have the potential to revolutionise the scientific community's viewpoint on existing technology. Eric claims that he thinks a ray gun caused this, and the science teacher urges him to try and locate the gun and bring it to him as it could prove invaluable. So later that afternoon, Eric sneaks into the alien's house and takes the ray gun. But just as he's about to leave, he's clocked by Lubbock and Exeter, who essentially reveal that they're aliens, that they have big plans happening soon, and that if Eric wants to squeal and tell the world he's living next to aliens, that they'd disappear immediately and Eric would look like a crazy person and most likely end up locked up. So Eric agrees to keep their secret and leaves immediately to take the ray gun to the teacher. And from here, the film basically becomes a chase movie, as the aliens realise that Eric has stolen the ray gun and they try to hunt him down to get it back, while Eric tries to evade capture by the aliens while also juggling his school's annual Halloween party and his personal life. With an alien invasion imminently incoming, will Eric be able to convince his friends that an invasion is only mere hours away? Will the professor figure out exactly how the ray gun works and change humanity's understanding of particle-based physics forever? And will Lubbock and Exeter successfully invade Earth? Or in Eric have they finally met their match? In this daft as a brush, manic 90-ish minute comedy sci-fi movie that, quite honestly, you'd be mad to take seriously. The biggest issue that this film has lies in its script, and it's nothing massive, but to me, this one's just a little bit flabby. Now, we're not talking massive amounts of padding here, but as is the case with most movies like this, I feel like the second and third acts could have probably been tightened up a little bit. Maybe lose about 10 or 15 minutes off the third act in particular, and this film would have probably worked about 10 times better for it. I don't know, there are just scenes that happen here and there where around halfway through the sequence I'd sit and ask myself, what's the point in this being here? What's it doing to move the film along? And it just wasn't contributing anything to the narrative. Now, that's not to say those scenes were annoying or anything, but if you're looking for a tightly trimmed movie that's meaty and to the point, this film definitely could have done with another couple of days in the edit suite in my opinion. The pacing's pretty nice here, the film never seems to run out of steam, quite the opposite in fact. Just when you think the film's gonna slow down, you'll suddenly get this manic burst of energy that'll just reset the pace and help bring the film back up and on the level, which definitely helped to keep the momentum of the film rolling along. And even though it finally does kind of collapse from exhaustion in the final few minutes, for it to run for about an hour and 30 of its hour and 32 minute runtime with a reasonably high energy is something I'd say definitely needs to be viewed as a positive here. This one does, however, have a bit of a problem keeping to an act structure. This is one of those movies that kind of feels like all the acts have bled into each other to the point that it's hard to separate them out. For example, the film sets up the high school Halloween party as being the big final showdown moment between Eric and the aliens, so you're on board with the idea of how it's going to go down. But then 45 minutes or so into this, it's the day of the Halloween party, and then we're suddenly thrust into the opening of the third act with about 45 minutes still to go. I mean, the first act's about as strong as a one-man band production can be, but the second act pretty much evaporates in front of your eyes. The bit from when Eric finds out his neighbours are aliens up to the Halloween party is the second act, and it occupies almost no time at all in this film. As a result, you do rather feel hurled about with this one. That middle developing act is really crucial to getting invested into the movie beyond a surface level, and they basically just airlock it. I guess because they thought it was a bit too slow moving in this zany alien chase movie. That being said, this film kind of trades on being farcical, so you don't have to be critically invested in the characters in the same way as you would, say, a straight horror or sci-fi film. This one mentally I kind of group in with films like Death Row Game Show or maybe to a lesser extent Airplane, in the sense that, yeah, the characters are important, but if the film took a hard left turn into abstract surrealism, I wouldn't really bat an eye. But yeah, while I enjoyed the tones and themes of the script and its attempts at modernising and pastiching the 50s B-movie horror and sci-fi genres, it is a bit inconsistent. Though when I found out how much this film cost to make, I quickly understood why there was so much inconsistency. This film cost $8,500 to make. Not $85,000, not $850,000, $8,500 for everything. Costumes, kit, film, actors, catering, lighting, sound, locations, you name it, it's included in that budget. The costume budget for this movie was $25. And when you consider that a good chunk of this film is set in the 1950s or features 50s costumes and cars, I am gobsmacked that this film even exists. $8.5k in today's money wouldn't even cover the director's catering on most modern low-budget shoots. And while I'll be the first to admit that this is not the prettiest looking film in the world, and it's not striving for period authenticity, the fact it even remotely looks and plays out the way it does is frankly miraculous. I don't know how Rick Sloane did this, I really don't. It can only be assumed that a lot of the props were his own personal possessions, and that the run and gun style of this production being shot in its entirety over a 9-day window had to be significant contributors to keeping the costs down. Because in 2021, I don't think you'd be able to approach the quality of a production that this film's put down for $8.5k. As mentioned, this production was written and directed by Rick Sloane. He has 16 directing and writing credits spanning a career of nearly 40 years, with his first being Blood Theatre, and don't worry, I'll get to that one in good time, in 1984, and his most recent venture being a period-authentic sequel to Hobgoblins in 2009. And even though I've not been too keen on his Vice Academy movies, I've got to say, the man has an incredibly distinctive style and tone. Like Mark Manos, you know when you're watching a Rick Sloane movie. There's just something to it, the vibe, the direction, the dialogue. It feels unnatural while at the same time feeling strangely comfortable in being what it is. I feel like Sloane knows his place in the Hollywood ecosystem. He knows he needs to make money on his ventures, but also that he wants to have fun with his shoots. And you can tell in every single one of these movies that most of the cast just seem to be having a good time shooting a movie. The direction, I'd say, was passable. Is it studio-polished perfection? No, absolutely not. But is it bottom-of-the-barrel fodder? Definitely not. This film shows clear development on Sloane's style as a director when compared to Blood Theatre. It builds on the elements that worked in his first foray into filmmaking, and again, given what the budget was for this production and the limitations that he had, and that he was now responsible for renting and procuring all of his own kit, I'd say it's actually pretty impressive that this film looks as half-decent as it does. There are clearly moments where things get a little bit wobbly, particularly any scenes in the neighbours' house, which is rather sparsely dressed to say the least, but there's a clear stylisation here, and his direction of the cast produces several sequences that gave me pre-Hairspray John Waters vibes. They're told to ham up, they're told to play it big, and when combined with sequences that are rather sparse on shot types and largely played for functionality, it produces something that feels altogether unique to the good-bad cinema genre. On that note, the Cine is distinctly functional as well, and while some people watching this would probably recoil in horror at the idea that a sequence could be pieced together from 2 to 3 mid and wide shots with minimal cutaways or close-ups, here, I think it helps the film along to keep purposefully sparse. It makes some of the absurd dialogue feel even more out of place than it would have otherwise, as the camera holds on actors for an eternity. A bit like pressing the meat on a grill, I feel if you put a ton of cutaways into these sequences, you'd detract from the performances and flavour that this film gives off. And with all the Rick Sloane films I've seen to date, the performances are a big part of helping create that unusual tonal vibe. So these long holding shots where you see every wart and boil of an actor's performance really helps push the campness and strangeness nicely along. And to that end, the performances... ooh boy, I almost feel bad to say these performances are awful because I enjoyed them so much. Marcus Vorter brings an unusual and quirky energy as leading man Eric in this, simultaneously trying to play gawky and Revenge of the Nerds level awkward alongside a more average Fast Times type of performance. It's flippant, erratic, and I could never tell throughout where he was going to take the character next. Some would say it was inconsistent, and that would be a turn-off for them, but it's the lack of consistency that kept me watching minute after minute right up to the credits. Jordana Capra and Joel Heil are also fab as Lubbock and Exeter. They're asked to play the roles as a frustrated, long-term, old married couple, and they do a splendid, if not otherworldly, job at it. There are a couple of slightly dated sex gags between them about how Lubbock's wife basically isn't interested in doing the do, that were a bit groan-worthy to my 21st century mentality, but this movie was made in 1986. I can forgive it for leaning mildly on one or two gags that barely scrabbled out of the 70s. The supporting cast are pretty much all strong too for what they're playing, with Jeffrey Culver playing the science teacher with a wonderful slight dodderiness and total acceptance of anything that's put in front of him that made me chuckle once or twice, and Cliff Corder is wonderfully bizarre as Eric's dad. In fact, come to think of it, most of the adults in this film are either cynical sorts who can't be bothered dealing with any of this nonsense, or total eccentrics who all have weird and unusual outlooks on the world. I'd say the only performance that didn't really work for me here was William Dristas as Eric's friend Sherwin. I don't know if he caught on to the tone that the film was running with, or if he was just playing a bit odd because this was his first acting role, but he gives a performance here that feels painfully self-aware that he knows that he's not in something particularly Oscar-worthy. He's not throwing his performance in any way, but I do feel like he's leaning into the cheese a bit too hard where all the other cast are trying to take it a little bit more seriously. As a result, he comes across as if he's playing bad, which is about the worst kind of a performance an actor can give for one of these movies. If you act as if you're in a bad movie, your performance is too self-aware, playing too strongly to the gallery, and it almost never comes out on screen as funny or entertaining as the actor intended. But yeah, quibbles aside, most of the people here knew what they were in and tried to play it as best they can. And the results are a tapestry of weird and wonderful little moments that really captivated me for the full runtime. Finally, the soundtrack, and honestly, there isn't really much to say. The entire film is scored with cheap synth sounds, with some mild pop thrown into the mix. I'd say most of this is tailored to sound like a 50s B-movie given an 80s kick up the arse. It sounds cheap, but that's what they're aiming for with the 50s B-movie aesthetic. So in that regard, it works out quite nicely. There are some quite nice stings, and the incidental music isn't nearly as irritating as you'd think going into a movie like this. I mean, I don't think I'd want to give this one a listen outside of the movie, but within the confines of a mid-80s, low no-budget sci-fi flick, I think it works here about as fine as it possibly could do. The Visitants, as far as I can research online, has never been released in the UK in any way, shape or form. I could find no information on a VHS, DVD or Blu-ray release for this one, so I have to assume that it never made it over here. But if you're sat with a UK VHS copy of The Visitants on your shelf right now, please do leave a comment and let me know, as I'd love to try and piece together a history for this thing. In the US, it had a VHS release in 1986 or 1987, I've seen conflicting reports, and then as far as I can tell, it disappeared until 2018, when it was released on DVD and Blu-ray as part of a double feature set with Sloane's first film, Blood Theatre, by Vinegar Syndrome. And they've done an astounding job. It's cleaned up wonderfully, and both features here come with full feature commentaries by the director, alongside Q&A sessions recorded at screenings. It's probably the best that this film will ever be seen in, quite honestly, and I highly recommend you pick it up. I feel The Visitants is for an acquired taste. I really got a kick out of it. I thought it was fractious, slightly awkward and laughably entertaining to watch. But this is a film that, in and of itself, feels comfortable in the skin it's in and is just happy to be what it was. It's like when you meet a socially awkward friend at a party who doesn't realise they're socially awkward. For you, it's a cringy but hilarious nightmare. But for them, they have no idea and they're just trying to have a good time. It's because of that at the same time I can appreciate that people who've put technical ability and performance above all else will probably struggle with this one. And if you're that kind of person, this feature may not be for you. If the end credits were to be believed, there were plans for a Visitants 2, though I think that might have just been a bit of a joke on Sloane's part, as his early films were usually crammed full of bizarre trailers for non-existent movies. But I'd check a sequel out if it ever came to fruition. I enjoyed this one. These are the kind of films I do this stuff for, and this has been a prime example of one of the hidden gems I so desperately tried to seek out. And I can tell you now that Vinegar Syndrome's release of this, alongside Blood Theatre, is probably one of my favourite purchases of the last year. It's just a pair of fun, stupid movies, and I think this one would probably make a good pairing with fellow sci-fi comedy Space Invaders. But if you just want to cut loose and watch something ridiculous, but entertainingly so, I can only wholeheartedly recommend that you check this one out.